We are Steve and Mark, photo educators and Westcott top pros.
And we're going to take you on a journey through flash photography, from fearful to flawless.
So why is lighting important? For us as photographers, it's all about the light.
It's not just about having enough light. It's about understanding the characteristics of light and how it affects your subject and the composition.
There's one thing that I've learned through all my years in photography. Photography takes work. It takes work to train yourself to see light, but more importantly, it takes work to find out how your camera sees light.
Have you found yourself in what you thought was the perfect location for shooting a portrait, only to find when you snapped that shutter, it didn't look anything like you saw in your head? That's probably because you weren't thinking about the light. Light is what's most important.
So some of our favorite photo locations also have some of the worst lighting conditions. When we're thrown into these lighting conditions, what do? We need to overcome this problem and create great light. That's when the work really begins. Let's give you 3 reasons to use flash. First, flash adds color. Do you want the colors in your image to pop? Flash can do that. Secondly, because you're in total control of where the light is coming from, you can improve contrast, or for that matter, you can even add contrast that isn't there. And the third reason, flash adds sharpness. Your photos will become sharper because you can shoot at faster shutter speeds and freeze your subjects. You know, I think the main reason people take blurry pictures isn't because they miss focus, but it's really because of slow shutter speeds. The answer to this problem is simple. It's flash.
So you're ready to dive in. You know, there's 5 components that you need to understand in order to master flash photography.
Now, 5 might sound like a lot, but I've got great news for you. If you master just the first 2, aperture and shutter speed, you're gonna be way ahead than most photographers out there. So let's get started with the first component.
So the first component we're going to look at is aperture. Aperture is simply just a hole or an opening in your lens that allows light to reach your camera sensor. Think of it like your eyeball. Your pupil, it expands to let more light in, and it shrinks down to let less light in. So quickly, people want to just pass over aperture because they feel like they already get it, or it's just kind of a boring subject. It stops being boring when you realize the power it holds over your flash exposure. Aperture is simple, yet it's probably the most verbally confusing part of the 5 components.
Well, that looks pretty good.
Okay, open up your aperture.
Huh?
You know, widen your lens.
What?
You know, bigger f-stop.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
No, it doesn't have to be this confusing. All those terms, they all mean the same thing. So if I told you to increase your aperture, you would use a lower or smaller f-stop number. This will make the hole larger. By doing this, you allow more light to reach the sensor, resulting in a brighter exposure. On the other hand, a narrower aperture or a bigger, larger f-stop number is going to let in less light, and it's going to lead to a darker exposure on your subject because you have closed down your lens. So here's something to think about when choosing which aperture to shoot at though. You know, when you adjust your aperture, you're not only controlling how bright or how dark your subject is going to be, but you're also determining how much of your scene is going to be in focus. When it comes to using a flash, you need to know this. Aperture controls the flash exposure on your subject. Flash fires in a fraction of a second. It literally can happen faster than a 10,000th of a second, depending on the power of your light. Now, this is faster than your shutter can even react. This is why I say aperture controls the amount of light falling on your subject. By opening or closing the aperture, we can now control how much light reaches the sensor in that 10,000th of a second. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so let's take a look at what I've been talking about. I'm gonna shoot this first shot at f8, and we're just gonna see what we're gonna get here with Lily. So looking right here, 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. So that is a properly exposed picture for what I want to see. If I were to adjust my aperture up to, let's say, f10, I just raised it a tiny bit, and I took that shot again, what do you see? You're seeing now that the light on the subject is getting less. We shut down that lens, it's getting a little bit darker. So rather than go back to f8, let's go a little wider, 5.6. At 5.6, now we can see Lily's getting pretty bright there. So simply by adjusting your aperture, you can control how much light is going to fall on your subject.
So now it's time to talk about that second component, shutter speed. So shutter speed is like a curtain that opens and closes in front of your camera sensor. When you take a photo, the shutter opens to let light in and then closes after a certain amount of time. So let's see how it works with your flash. Shutter controls how long your camera sensor is exposed to light. So when you use a faster shutter speed, the sensor is exposed for a shorter amount of time, letting in less light. So here's what you need to know. Shutter speed has little to do with the exposure on your subject, but it has everything to do with exposing the ambient light. So the big question is, what is ambient light? Ambient light is a continuous light source. It can be from anything, like the sun, it could be from a street light, even something like a car headlight. Any source can be continuous light. The light from the flash is gone in an instant. Ambient light continues to affect your exposure long after the flash is gone. So the longer or the slower your shutter speed, the brighter the ambient light will be, or the brighter your background will be. And the faster your shutter speed, the darker your background will be.
Okay, here we go. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Whoa. Have you ever taken a flash photo that looks like this? This is because you shot with a shutter speed that's faster than your camera's sync speed. So what is sync speed? To best understand sync speed, it helps to understand how the shutter works in your camera. Now, this is not true for all cameras, but most cameras still have what's called a focal plane shutter, and the ones that don't, they work close to the same way. I don't want to get hung up on that. We just want you to understand why you're limited to a sync speed. So think of it this way. If we were in complete darkness and I fired the flash and I left my shutter open for 10 seconds, but the flash only took a 10,000th of a second to flash and be gone, there wouldn't be any reason to leave my shutter open any longer than that 10,000th of a second. So the shutter really wouldn't do anything because it's just not fast enough. So if we left that shutter open for 10 seconds or 10 minutes, it wouldn't make any difference.
So let's take a look at the focal plane shutter. Under normal flash conditions, the first curtain opens, exposing your sensor to the subject. The flash fires when the first curtain is fully open. Then the second curtain covers the sensor. The quickest amount of time that this process can take place is called your camera's sync speed. Remember that black bar in your photo? If you shoot a photo at a speed faster than your camera's sync speed, you're going to run into that black bar issue. Here's why. When the camera fires, the second curtain can't wait. It needs to start closing or it won't make it in time to finish the exposure. The flash is still going to fire when the first curtain is fully open. However, a portion of your sensor is covered by that second curtain. This is what creates that black bar. This is the reason you cannot shoot faster than your camera's sync speed. Don't get too ahead of us. Right now you're saying, hey, what about high-speed sync? We'll get to that a little later. It's so important that you understand the concepts first, because while high-speed sync is great, it's not always the right answer. Now that you have an understanding of shutter speed and how the shutter in our camera works, you can use shutter speed to take control of that ambient light.
You know, before we move on to those final 3 components of flash exposure, I think we need to take a minute and talk about what's a stop of light. You know, that's a phrase we throw around a lot, you know, and we act like everybody knows what we mean. But simply put, a stop of light, it's really a measurement of light. It's how we measure light. It's a set amount. So put it this way. If I needed to gain 1 stop of light, what I'm really saying is I need twice as much light as I'm using presently. And if I needed to lose a stop of light, What I'm saying is I need half the amount of light that I'm using now.
So here's what's cool, is the increment settings on your camera gear, they're all based on stops of light.
Yeah.
So things like your ISO, your flash power settings, those are all based on stops of light. All right, so let's talk about something really fun now, ISO. So ISO is not difficult to understand, and it's not even scary to use. All it's doing is making your sensor more or less sensitive to the light. There are a few things to remember about ISO. ISO affects both the ambient light and the light on the subject at the same time. So with ISO, every time you double the ISO number, it equals a stop of light. Here's what I mean. If you go from 100 to 200 ISO, I'm doubling that ISO number. By doing so, I just added a stop of light. If I go from 200 to 400, I'm adding another stop of light. It's super, super simple. Again, if your picture is coming out dark, simply raise that ISO or lower your ISO if it's too bright. Now I know right now some of you guys are saying, I don't like to raise my ISO because it creates noise in my image. Come on, let's talk about reality. Today's modern cameras do not struggle with high ISO like our older cameras, the cameras in the past. So let me give you a good example. So concerts are probably one of my favorite things to shoot. I have literally shot hundreds of concerts, and I can tell you that I have rarely shot a concert below 1200 ISO. In fact, many times I'm up there in the 3200 range. With our modern cameras, I can still get a clean image that's ready to deliver. So don't be afraid to ever bump up your ISO. ISO is just another one of those tools for your camera toolbox.
So here's all you need to know about flash power. More power, more light. Less power, less light. Pretty simple.
Where did he go? Is he coming back? Is it lunchtime?
Oh, okay, so maybe there's a little bit more to it than that. So what do you need to know about flash power? Why not just set the flash on full power and then make all of my adjustments with the camera controls? That's what we've been talking about. Can I just control stops of light simply by opening or closing my aperture? Of course you can. But sometimes maybe your lens won't open up any wider, or maybe you want a little deeper depth of field. Flash power is just one more tool that we have to increase our exposure options. So remember when we told you that our equipment is based on stops of light? Each increment or power setting on your flash is one stop of light. So if our flash was set at full power and we wanted to lose one stop of light, you could just set it to half power. Half the light is one stop. So let's take a minute and let's talk about modern gear. The Westcott lights that we're using today by default are set to whole numbers. Today I'm shooting with the FJ400 by Westcott, and it goes from 1 being its lowest power to 9 being full power. So if my flash today was set at 9 and I drop it to 8, it's the same thing as going from full power to half power. Because I cut the power in half, I lose one stop of light. If I go from 8 down to 7, it's the same as if I was going from half power to quarter power in fractions. So again, I've cut the light in half, so I've lost one stop of light. Every time we cut the power in half, we lose a stop of light. Or think of it this way. If I started at 7 and I was really underexposed, maybe by 2 stops, the way I could gain those 2 stops of light is simply from going from 7 to 8 to 9. That's 2 stops of light. So without changing anything on my camera, I'm able to get those 2 stops of light back pretty quickly. Pretty easy. Let's take a look at it. Let me try this. Steve, let me get a shot here of Lily.
Looks awesome.
So, all right, Lily, you're gonna stand right there. I'm gonna get a shot here and see how this looks. My power setting right now is I'm at 6 power. And just as I thought, I'm about 2 stops underexposed. So I'm gonna go ahead and go from 6 power to 7 to 8. So that's 2 stops of light I've added just by changing my flash. And let's take a look here. Fantastic, that looks amazing. So just like that, I added 2 stops of light to my exposure simply by changing the flash power. So here's one cool thing is with flash power, maybe it's something you don't use all the time, but it's just one more tool to throw in the toolbox. To fully understand the final component, flash to subject distance, we need to talk about the inverse square law. Now, the inverse square law states that the intensity of an effect, such as an illumination, changes in an inverse proportion to the square of the distance from the source. Pretty simple, right?
I don't even understand what he said. Are you reading that?
Okay, you caught me. I don't even know what I said. Thanks, Wikipedia. But for us as photographers, here's what you really need to know. Every time the distance between your subject and your light source doubles, you lose 2 stops of light. And then anytime the distance between your subject and your light is cut in half, you're gonna gain 2 stops of light. I know it might sound a little bit confusing, but let's help you out. So I'm gonna start with Lily today, and we're gonna have her stand there. We're gonna get the light like you've got about a foot away. I've got the power setting at 6. I've got my camera set at f16, and we're gonna see what we get at f16. Yeah, right there, she's perfectly exposed. So let's double the distance, so from 1 foot to 2 feet. Right there, we're gonna take another shot with the same settings, and what I'm gonna notice is I'm about 2 stops underexposed because I doubled that distance. So what I'm gonna do is, rather than change anything else, I'm just gonna open my lens up from f16 to f8, that's 2 stops, and take that shot again. And just like that, I brought back those 2 stops of light that we were missing. So let's double it again. Not that initial 1 foot, but we're at 2 feet. Let's move it back to 4 feet. So there we go. Without changing anything, other than I'm gonna widen my shot here, we lost 2 stops again. Why? Inverse square law. So what I'm gonna go is from f8 down to f4, or open my lens up to f4. And let's take that shot. And we just brought back those 2 stops of light that we lost. So we could keep on going. We could go from 4 feet now to 8 feet, and then I just have to open my lens up 2 more stops. But you see where we're going with this. We could just keep going back. You'd lose more and more stops, and I would just make the adjustment. So let's put this in practical terms. If you need more power out of your light, rather than sometimes opening your lens or playing with your ISO, how about just move your light a little bit closer? Or if you've got too much light, how about just move it back? So by adding and subtracting light, by using the inverse square law, you again have just another tool that you can put into your toolbox.
Oh, that looks pretty killer, Mark.
Ooh, I love that.
You know, why don't you take this one?
Okay.
Like, you give it a whirl. Let's put it all together, right?
Okay.
Everything we learned so far.
So what was your settings?
You tell me what your settings are.
Okay, right now my camera's just at 100th of a second, 7.1 on my
Try
aperture.
it, see what happens.
Let's just look and let's see. Ooh, I love this composition. All right, it looks great, but she's like 1 stop underexposed.
Yeah, okay, so what can we do? We have 5 components.
Okay.
Let's maybe start with aperture, right?
Okay, so what I'm at is I'm at 7.1.
Yeah, okay.
So let's open it up a stop. So I'm gonna take it down or open it up
So you're
to
opening your lens.
F5.
Right.
And let's see if we can get that exposure right. 1, 2, 3. All right, I love this. So
I think your exposure on her is really good.
Okay.
Right? But the background's a little out of whack, right?
It
It's
is.
It's too bright.
I like my background's
Yep.
a little darker.
So what can we do?
So number 2 of those components was our shutter speed.
Yeah.
So I'm at 100. So let's move it to 250th of a second. So I'm going to be right at the edge of my sync speed. Now that everybody knows what that is. And I'm going to shoot there, and that's exactly what I was seeing.
Yeah, so her exposure didn't change,
No,
but you darken the background.
That's right.
Just by changing.
sped up the
shutter
shutter speed, we darken the background.
Yep,
So
that's awesome.
aperture controls the light on the subject,
Yep.
shutter speed controls the ambient light.
So you made 2 adjustments just by quickly adjusting those.
Okay.
That's pretty sweet.
So how about I'll put it back to 7.1.
Okay, start from the beginning.
Okay.
And then I think let's talk about flash power,
Okay.
right? So what can we do with flash power
Yeah, so rather than making up
adjusting
that
anything there.
adjustment here,
Yep.
let's do it with our flash power.
Okay.
I'm right now on 4 power. So we felt like it was about a stop underexposed.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go ahead and go to 5.
Okay.
And let's see
what
what that's gonna look like. Okay, right here, Lily. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. It's the same shot
Yep.
that I took, but instead of opening my lens, I just turned the flash up.
Perfect. Perfect.
So how about I put that back now?
Yeah. So start fresh.
I'm
Exactly
gonna
where you were.
put it back to 4. Okay, this
Okay.
time.
Now we can talk about distance. We talked about that before, right?
Okay.
In your inverse square laws, like what happens if we make that
So if I
closer?
move it, if I half that distance, I'm gonna lose 2 stops of light.
Absolutely.
I only need to lose 1. So
Yep.
the inverse square law doesn't work exactly as that, you know, if I only do it now a quarter, I'm gonna get 1. But so I just know that I'm gonna just move it a little bit closer. This might be a little game of seeing how close I
Yep.
need to put it. But let's see if that does it for us. There we go.
Bingo.
It's the identical shot,
Yep.
but we just did it by moving our light rather
Perfect.
than changing our settings.
Perfect.
Here, changing it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So our 5th component was ISO.
ISO. So reset.
Okay, let's set, I'll move this back.
Yep.
So we're gonna be underexposed a little bit again.
Shift this back to where it was here. Okay. A little bit. There we go.
So the issue with ISO now is if I increase my ISO, right now I'm at ISO 250.
Yep.
If I go to 500, that's gonna be a stop of light.
Yeah. So ISO is global, right? So it takes care of everything.
So it's not only going to raise the exposure on her, it's probably gonna raise the background as well by a stop. But let's just kind of
See what happens.
see what it looks like. That looks pretty good.
pretty amazing,
I
actually.
still, you know, it raised the background a little bit,
little
but
bit.
not so much
No.
that it's bothering me in any way.
Yep.
So I think, you know, again, by having these different tools, there's different times to use them.
Absolutely.
So now, once you start understanding these 5 components, you start seeing, what did we say in the beginning? What we love about learning Flash is having options.
You have options. So now you have all these different tools in your toolbox to use as options. So now I know you have all been waiting for this. It's finally time for high-speed sync. So when is high-speed sync a great option? It's when you want to shoot in super bright lighting conditions, wide open on your camera. So high-speed sync opens up a whole new world of shooting in bright light. If I'm not using high-speed sync, the fastest that I can shoot on my camera is 1/250th of a second. But that's gonna make my photo overexposed. Let me just try that. So I'm gonna shoot wide open here. All right, Lily, you ready? Wow, that is not the exposure that I was looking for. So what can I do? I can do something like closing down my aperture. I'm gonna go to F8, right? Shoot the same image here. And actually that gets me exactly what I was looking for, except I want to shoot wide open. I want that creamy background, all of that together. So I'm gonna actually shoot at a faster shutter speed. Now, normally if I shot at a faster shutter speed, I would have that black bar issue that we talked about earlier. But I'm gonna shoot this wide open again, 1.8, and I'm gonna just try 4,000th of a second, and let's see what we come up with. All right, Lily, here we go. Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for, exactly. So you may not wanna use high-speed sync every single time, but it certainly adds another tool in your toolbox. And now that you understand how light works with your camera, you have all the tools you need to start shooting with Flash.
You know, what is the #1 question that we get asked?
That's an easy one.
Is it,
What modifier should I use? Or what's the right
what's
modifier?
the right
right?
modifier?
You know what I always say? I have no idea.
That's right.
No idea. Because it really comes down to what your own personal preference is. I maybe like a certain modifier. You like a different type of modifier. We like 2 different types of light.
Yeah.
So
So why don't we go through
do it.
like 4 or 5 of our favorite modifiers?
the ones we use all the time.
Yeah, so let's start with, we've got the standard reflector on this right now.
And that's going to give us a harder light. I generally generally like harder light, right? You're a soft light guy. So let me shoot this.
Okay, so
Okay,
let's move it in
let's
place.
just set this up.
This will work well because this kind of has that fashion-y look with what Lily's
Yeah.
wearing.
All right, Lily, you're looking awesome up there. So let's see what this looks like with the standard reflector. I'm shooting at 1/250 at 2.8, 1/25 of a second. And bingo, like that gets me a great shot right away. Come and take a look at this and see what you think.
Yeah, that looks fantastic.
I'm loving it. Good.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tell everybody why you would use a bare reflector in a situation like this, or what would make you grab that reflector?
I think it really has a lot to do with what Lily's wearing right now, right? She's more defined in this picture.
Okay.
Right? She's not the soft, necessarily feminine look. She's a defined feminine look. So I want to give her a little bit more edge, and that's what that reflector will actually do, is give her that chiseled look that I would be looking for. Because I've got a very hard surface in the background, I want her to kind of match that hardness, not to be soft and lovely.
Yeah, so you're kind of going more for a fashion
I am.
look.
This is a high fashion look. Like when I take this, I look at this and I say, man, she
really pops
She
in that
does,
image.
and she just stands out. Like she's got power. It's a powerful image.
All right, so let's move on to the second
Okay,
modifier.
what's that?
This is the most underutilized one that I see today, and that is the umbrella.
Yes.
Right? I choose to use a shoot-through umbrella if I'm going to use an umbrella. A lot of people love bounce.
Yep.
And I think they just give fantastic light.
Yeah. So let's take off this reflector.
You could actually.
Or do you want to leave it on?
I think let's leave it
Okay,
on, and let's
leave it
just
on.
add the 43-inch umbrella. And I love the shoot-through because I love the soft look that I get from it.
Yeah,
so
you're more into that soft.
I'm going to
look.
shift over this way a little bit and center her up in that window frame right
Okay.
there. 1, 2, 3. And it's a very similar image to yours,
It is.
but it has a softer look.
Well, you know why? Because I see more wraparound light.
Correct. And that is one of the things that I really like umbrellas. They're super easy to use. I can just throw them in a backpack. I use these a lot when I'll shoot like weddings, things that I'm on the go. And one of the things you got to always worry about though is it's not if your light's going to blow over, it's when you're shooting outside with it. So it's one of those things you never want to walk away from. But there is a downside to shooting umbrellas a lot of times indoors is the fact that we get such a fast fall off of light.
Yep.
And if you get shooting too wide, a lot of times you'll actually see that line where the umbrella stops and starts. But as long as you're being aware of that, that light is just gorgeous that comes out of
I'm
there.
going to say one thing about the umbrella that I like is I think they're the most economical modifier out there.
Correct. It's a great place to start if you've never used modifiers.
For sure.
So,
for sure.
are you ready to move on to number 3?
Let's do it.
I love the fact that umbrellas just go up and down so quickly. And one of the other things is, with an umbrella, the nice thing is almost any light that you own, the umbrella is going to fit into it. And so you don't have to make it specific to the mount of your light.
For sure, for sure. All right, hey, let's use what we use actually a lot.
Yeah.
Is the softbox, right?
This is kind of our go-to
It is,
modifier.
and that's what you hear a lot of people talking about is, a softbox. So we've got the Rapid Box Switch Octa M, medium-sized softbox here. It gives us a nice soft light. It's actually one of my favorite modifiers. So let's, once he gets that in place, we're gonna go ahead, Lily, and we're gonna capture an amazing shot here. And let's see how different it looks from the others. Now, I think it looks, when I look at the back of this, looks very similar to the umbrella.
It
really,
does.
Right?
The light on her is almost identical.
It's almost identical.
It's just you don't have the light now spilling onto the ground like you did. So
But I have incredible wraparound light on
exactly.
her.
So
actually
the
really
light on
like it.
her's the same, but you're not lighting the foreground and the background
For
as much.
sure.
So that's the advantage of shooting with a softbox is you get to control where that light's going to go.
Just keep talking because I'm going to keep shooting.
Okay.
This is too good right now.
So that's the Rapid Box Switch Octa M. Right. So why don't
All right.
you, hand me the beauty dish.
All right, I'll put it on for you.
So this is a modifier that I really love to use, but it really has a specific use. And it's something that, you can use it different ways. There's no right or wrong way, but I think to really get the look that people think of as a beauty dish, it really needs to be placed kind of dead center on your subject. So we're gonna go ahead and put this straight out. I'm gonna kind of shoot a little bit out of an angle, so I want your face straight on. So one of the things that you'll find with a beauty dish is that it's not super forgiving. It's one that you play around with until you get kind of the height right. And let's see what we got going here. That looks pretty good. Let's, yep, just drop your chin just a tiny bit there. You're good. And
so this is giving us a totally different look than anything else we shot with today.
it is. So what's happening is with the beauty dish, this is a larger light source. So we get, you know, what we get from soft, we get nice fall off on the skin, but it's also a rather hard light as well. And what's going to happen is it's going to really chisel and show features. So when I'm shooting a model, I love pulling out the beauty dish because now it's going to show off those cheekbones. It's going to throw a nice shadow under the chin.
It's like the combination between the reflector,
correct,
right, and your big soft box.
It is. So let me ask you this question.
Okay.
We've looked at 4 of our favorite modifiers that we like to use. The question that I asked you in the beginning is the question everybody asks. So what's the right modifier?
And the answer is I still don't know, right? I like different kind of light generally than you do, right? A different texture.
So the answer is it's really personal taste.
It's totally personal, whatever you think is the best. So what I'd love to know though actually is what you guys think from watching this. Do you have a favorite as you're going through this? We tried these 4. I think it's up to you to pick.
All right, so wow, what a great time today shooting.
Incredible day, incredible day. You know, we took everybody from being fearful, hopefully to flawless, but I have a feeling some people out there are still fearful. They're still a little scared. I think the most important thing that you can take away from watching this video is going out there and trying this all yourself. That's what helps you learn. You got to try it yourself. Once you do that, you truly will take yourself from fearful to flawless.